The entire lobby fell silent when 11-year-old Wren Whitmore suddenly ran across the marble floor, wrapped her one remaining arm around the janitor's waist, and held him as if she had finally found the person she had been searching for her entire life. Her mother, billionaire heiress Celeste Whitmore, stared in disbelief from the top of the staircase because Wren had not hugged anyone outside their family in nearly 3 years. Not teachers. Not doctors. Not therapists. Not even the wealthy socialites who constantly surrounded them. Yet there she was, pressing her face against a stranger's faded work shirt while the janitor stood completely frozen, one hand trembling over the child's shoulder. And then Celeste noticed something that made her blood run cold. Beneath the man's sleeve was a faded military tattoo, and attached to his battered key ring was a tiny silver emblem bearing the words that would soon reveal a secret none of them could have imagined. Before we continue, if you believe kindness can reach people when money cannot, and that forgiveness, hope, and second chances can change a life, please like this video, leave a comment, share this story with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe to our channel so our family can continue bringing you emotional journeys like this one. Wren Whitmore had been born into extraordinary wealth, but money had never been able to give her back what she lost. 3 years earlier, when she was 8, a terrible accident had taken her left arm and nearly taken her life. Celeste had spent millions on surgeons, rehabilitation specialists, private tutors, experimental treatments, and the finest medical equipment money could buy. She had even purchased an entire rehabilitation facility after becoming convinced that one of its specialists was not giving Wren enough attention. Yet the more Celeste tried to protect her daughter, the smaller Wren's world became. The girl who had once loved climbing trees, painting enormous pictures, and racing through the gardens of their Connecticut estate gradually stopped doing almost everything. She hated photographs. She refused to wear sleeveless clothing. She avoided school events. She became uncomfortable when people looked at her. Celeste thought she was protecting her daughter from cruelty, but without realizing it, she was also teaching Wren that her missing arm was something the world should be ashamed to see. The Whitmore family owned hotels, technology companies, shipping interests, and commercial properties across several countries, and their headquarters occupied a polished 20-story building in Manhattan. Celeste had transformed the executive floor into a place where Wren could spend afternoons whenever she wanted. There were art rooms, a private library, a music studio, and a small garden terrace. On paper, it was paradise. In reality, Wren often sat alone with a sketchbook, drawing people from behind because she did not want to imagine their faces looking at her. One Monday afternoon, while Celeste was preparing for an important meeting with investors, Wren slipped away from her tutor and wandered downstairs. She followed the sound of a soft humming noise coming from the service corridor and found a middle-aged janitor polishing the floor near a large window. His name was Everett Hale. He was 41, quiet, broad-shouldered, and carried himself with a strange alertness that seemed almost out of place among cleaning carts and buckets. Everett noticed Wren before she noticed him. He did not stare at her missing arm. He did not lower his eyes awkwardly. He simply looked at the sketchbook under her right arm and smiled. Wren stopped several feet away. She was accustomed to adults changing their expressions when they saw her. Some became overly sympathetic. Others became nervous. Everett did neither. He simply continued polishing the floor until Wren slowly walked closer. On the glass beside him was a reflection of a bird outside the window, and Wren began drawing it. Everett quietly pointed toward the sky, showing her another bird flying farther away. For the first time in months, Wren smiled without being asked to. That small moment became a routine. Every afternoon, Wren found a reason to pass through the lobby. Sometimes Everett was cleaning the windows. Sometimes he was replacing a light bulb. Sometimes he was pushing a cart through the hallway. He never treated her like a fragile child. If she dropped something, he waited for her to pick it up. If she struggled with a door, he did not immediately rush to open it. When she wanted help, he helped. When she wanted independence, he stepped back. That simple respect gradually became more powerful than all the expensive therapy Celeste had purchased. One afternoon, Wren brought Everett a drawing. It showed a girl standing on the edge of a cliff with one arm raised toward the sky. Behind her was an enormous ocean. Everett studied it for several seconds, then gently tapped the drawing. Wren watched his face carefully. She wanted to know whether he saw the girl as broken. Instead, Everett seemed almost proud. He pointed toward the horizon she had drawn and then toward the girl's raised arm, as if reminding her that the picture was not about what the girl had lost. It was about where she was going. Wren understood. That evening, she carried the drawing upstairs and placed it above her bed. Celeste eventually noticed the change. Her daughter was laughing again. She was eating better. She had started going outside. She had even asked for a new set of paints. But when Celeste discovered that the person responsible for Wren's sudden happiness was a janitor, suspicion immediately replaced gratitude. Celeste had spent her entire adult life surrounded by people who wanted something from her. She knew how easily access to wealthy families could become an opportunity. She quietly ordered her security director to investigate Everett Hale. The report arrived the next morning, and it raised more questions than it answered. Everett had no criminal history. His employment record was clean. He had worked ordinary maintenance jobs in several states. But there was a 5-year gap in his public employment history. His military records were partially sealed. His references were unusually limited. Celeste became convinced that something was wrong. She instructed building security to keep a discreet eye on him and told the Human Resources Department to find a reason to move him away from Wren's usual areas. Wren noticed immediately. The next afternoon, Everett was not in the lobby. She searched the corridors until she found him carrying supplies toward a storage room. She ran to him, and before anyone could stop her, she hugged him around the waist with her single arm. That was the moment Celeste saw them. She stood frozen on the staircase, stunned by the sight of her daughter embracing a man she barely knew. Wren had not hugged Celeste like that since before the accident. Celeste walked toward them, anger and fear fighting inside her. Everett immediately stepped back, but Wren refused to let go. Celeste looked at the man's key ring and saw the silver emblem she had noticed earlier. She recognized the insignia from a military history book she had once seen in her father's library. It was associated with the United States Navy SEALs. Celeste's expression changed. She demanded an explanation, and Everett finally admitted that he had served as a Navy SEAL. He had spent years in special operations, but he had never talked about it because he did not consider his military service something that made him special. During a rescue operation overseas, Everett had been seriously injured while protecting members of his team. Several friends had not survived. He had returned home physically alive but emotionally shattered. He struggled with ordinary life, crowds, loud noises, and the constant expectation that he should somehow become the person he had been before. Eventually, he chose a quiet job because he wanted to rebuild his life without medals, attention, or people treating him like a hero. Celeste asked why he had never mentioned any of this. Everett looked at Wren before answering. He explained that he had never wanted Wren to know about his military past because she did not need another person telling her what she should become. She needed someone willing to accept who she already was. Celeste was stunned by the answer. She had spent 3 years trying to turn Wren into the girl she remembered, while Everett had quietly accepted the girl standing in front of him. Then Everett revealed something even more painful. During his rehabilitation, he had once met a wounded veteran who had lost an arm and refused to leave his hospital room. That man had told Everett that losing part of your body was not the same as losing your future. Everett had remembered those words for years. When he first saw Wren hiding her arm, he recognized the same fear in her that he had once seen in himself and others he had served beside. He had never planned to become important to her. He simply could not walk past someone carrying a burden he understood. Celeste finally realized that her greatest mistake had not been trusting the wrong person. It had been assuming that love meant removing every obstacle from Ren's path. She had spent millions making the world easier for her daughter, but she had never allowed Ren to discover that she could face difficult things herself. That realization broke something open inside Celeste. She began to cry, not because she was embarrassed by her daughter, but because she suddenly understood how often her fear had disguised itself as protection. Ren looked between them and quietly reached for her mother's hand. Celeste knelt beside her daughter and, for the first time, did not look at the missing arm. She looked directly into Ren's eyes. She apologized for treating her like something that needed to be fixed. Ren did not immediately respond. She simply leaned forward and rested her forehead against her mother's. It was a small gesture, but it carried 3 years of pain, anger, fear, and love. After that day, everything changed slowly rather than magically. Celeste stopped canceling activities because she was afraid someone might stare. She stopped choosing Ren's clothes for her. She stopped answering questions directed at her daughter. Ren began speaking for herself. She joined an adaptive swimming program, started painting again, and eventually returned to school events. She even began designing artwork for a children's organization that helped young people adjust to limb loss. Everett remained a janitor at the building for a while, but Celeste eventually offered him a position managing a new foundation she created for wounded veterans and children living with disabilities. He initially refused because he did not want charity. Celeste told him it was not charity. She wanted his experience, his judgment, and his ability to see people beyond their injuries. Everett eventually accepted, but only after insisting that the foundation be built around independence rather than pity. Months later, Ren stood on a stage during the foundation's first public event. Hundreds of people filled the room, including veterans, children, parents, doctors, teachers, and donors. Celeste sat in the front row. Everett stood near the side of the stage wearing a simple suit instead of his old janitor uniform. Wren had spent weeks preparing her presentation. She spoke about courage, but not the kind people see in movies. She spoke about the courage to enter a room when you are afraid people will stare. The courage to ask for help without feeling weak. The courage to accept help without surrendering your independence. And the courage to forgive someone who loved you so much that their fear became a cage. When Wren finished, the audience stood and applauded. Celeste was crying openly. Everett looked down for a moment, overwhelmed by memories he rarely allowed himself to feel. Then Wren walked toward him. She raised her single arm, and Everett bent down so she could embrace him. This time, Celeste did not feel jealousy, fear, or suspicion. She simply smiled and joined them. Years later, Wren would still remember the day she hugged a janitor in the lobby. She would remember that she had not known his military history. She had not cared about his medals, his past, or his secrets. She had simply recognized something in him that everyone else had overlooked. He understood what it meant to carry an invisible wound. Everett would later tell her that she had saved him too. She had reminded him that a person could survive something terrible and still become useful, loved, and happy again. And Celeste finally understood the lesson her wealth had never been able to teach her. You cannot buy courage for someone you love. You cannot protect a person from every painful look, every cruel word, or every difficult day. Sometimes the greatest act of love is not standing in front of someone to block the world. Sometimes it is standing beside them and letting them discover that they are strong enough to face it. Before we reach the final moment of this story, leave a meaningful comment and tell us what you believe Wren taught Celeste. That true protection means shielding someone from pain, or giving them the confidence to face pain without being alone. Your words may give hope to someone who is struggling silently today. If this story touched your heart, please like this video, leave a meaningful comment, share it with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe to our channel so you never miss another emotional journey. Because sometimes the person we think has come to save us is actually the person who teaches us how to save ourselves. And sometimes, Behind an ordinary uniform, there is an extraordinary story waiting for someone kind enough to look beyond the surface. Wren lost an arm, but she never lost her future. Everett lost friends, peace, and years of his life to wounds no one could see, but he found a new purpose in the eyes of a little girl who refused to judge him by his past. And Celeste, who once believed she could solve every problem with money, finally discovered the one thing wealth could never purchase: the healing power of acceptance, forgiveness, and human connection.